Welcome to Alchemical Journey TV, the only show that debuts the transformation of real alchemists in the modern day. On today's episode, we will be talking about the waterworks, and we'll be speaking with Phoenix in the Amazon rainforest about some of the things he's been doing. And he's in the lab right now, and we'll join him to see what he's been up to. Hey, Phoenix, how you doing?
Hey, Michael. Thanks so much, man. I'm doing great, man. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. I'm just hanging out here in Utah, a little bit jealous of you, but we have a beautiful day here, and I love the mountains, so I'm just going to keep talking myself into feeling okay about being here and not there.
Yeah, well, whatever works, man. Whatever works. So it is beautiful, though, in Utah this time of year. I think
Yeah.
that there's really only two seasons, the spring and the fall, that make it worth living there. So.
So I can see you've got a whole lab set up here and a beautiful window view. Can you kind of give us an overview of what you've been working on?
Yeah, so since the time that we dropped off here at Corriente Herbals, which is located at the Yacu Eco Village Retreat Center here in Tarapoto, Peru, we've been extremely, extremely busy, and I've been posting some pictures and talking about the works that we've been doing with the waterworks. But I really wanted to bring you guys into the lab and kind of show you a little bit more about some of the things that we have going on today. And even though we're going to be focusing a lot of time on the waterworks, I'm also going to be showing you a few of the other things that we have going on. So the very first thing that I have is in this stainless steel pot right over here that you can see. I'm actually boiling 15 really awesome eggs. Now, eggs aren't pasteurized here like they are at home, and they're like this deep orange yolk. And so I strongly suggest to anybody who's going to be getting into alchemy to first try your hand with the boil of egg. I think that it really is one of the most important staples to have in the laboratory, because you burn yourself or caustic solutions can spill on your skin and things like that. So the alchemical oil of egg is tremendously important, and it's super easy to make. If you can make hard-boiled eggs, chances are you can make the alchemical oil of egg. So what we're doing right over here is boiling eggs. We're doing it at a very, very low temperature. They've been going for about 3 hours now. Most people just boil eggs the way that they do culinarily, but in my opinion and in my experience, that really doesn't suffice for a good oil of egg. First rule is that you can't really ever have any sort of the green sulfur dioxide release around the outside of the egg. I guess you can, but it won't help anybody. It will actually only kind of cause a detriment to the product, and it makes it stinky. The sulfur dioxide that gets released as a result of overcooking the eggs and releasing that volatile sulfur on the outside of the hard-boiled egg, and of course it can't escape the egg white at that point. And so we bring them to a very, very, very gentle boil for longer periods of time. And I mean, when I say boil, we're talking tiny, tiny, tiny little bubbles forming on the pan and then forming on the eggs. And so they're never actually boiling all the way. And I think that that's the most important. And once you have that, we separate out the shells and the whites and the yolks. And the yolks we mash up with a fork, and then immediately you can dry them. I put them in the dehydrator, or some people immediately put them into alcohol and start working with them. So basically you just make it like a standard tincture though. Take your egg yolk, whether completely fresh and mashed up or dehydrated a little bit, you put it into a jar or into a flask and stopper it airtight. Make sure that it's hermetically sealed, or you work with a ground glass stopper and allow it to macerate. Shake it, agitate it a lot. 40 degrees Celsius is pretty typical, although one trick that I really like is I like to put it in the freezer, especially when I'm using 95% alcohol for the maceration, because it causes the biomass of the egg yolks to compress and squeeze out more of the volatile oils. And then once I take it out of the freezer, I let it get to room temperature and shake it around and agitate it some more, and then I'll put it into the incubator for about 24 to 48 hours and really let it dry everything else out. And in this way, I've been able to more or less standardize a very, very high quality organic oil of egg that is not derived with an acetone uh, uh, extraction that is not derived from commercial egg yolks and things like this. So the energetics are also very much so there. Once you have your tincture, you can either take it as a tincture, you can evaporate out some of the alcohol if you want a stronger tincture of the oil of egg, or alternatively, you can evaporate out or distill out all of the alcohol, just leaving the pure oil of egg, and bottle that and apply that topically, mix it into cosmetic products, all sorts of things like that. I think it's one of the most important stuff. And I mean, Michael, you've used the oil of egg. What do you think about it?
Well, one thing I wanted to mention on that is you mentioned saying that that would be a good first project, or at least one of the first projects in alchemy. And one thing that about the oil of egg is it seems like it's something that everybody can use. Like I can't say that every spagyric is for every person and that it's going to be helpful for every person, but the oil of egg has so many applications, whether it be topically or internally, and anybody can use it. I mean, especially is
yeah, man. I important thing. I think that that's really important. The thing is something that is really important that not too many people talk about. And I'll actually pull this out of the sand here and I'll show this to you. These are some flowers from some trees that I found here. And I just literally, right before we started, right before we went live, I went out and I harvested these off of the trees. And I put these flowers in here. Now, I have absolutely no idea name of this plant is, but I've been connecting with it energetically for the last couple of days, and it's really been screaming my name. And this particular flower, I get the sense that it might have a little bit of psychotropic qualities to it, or at least something shamanically, because it does not seem like it has a normal medicinal quality to it. It's really been calling my name, and I'm going to be making something that we call an aqueous essence. An aqueous essence is extracted with aqua, or water. And the reason that we start with stretched foliage is because it applies by many of the same principles as like a hydrosol, or many of the same principles as like a flower essence, in that we're going to be putting our distilled water, in fact I'll do this right now as I'm making it, putting our distilled water in here in the amount of 125 liters, or 125 milliliters, excuse me. And for those of you who are wondering how I know that I have 125 milliliters in there, is because I that my report is 200 milliliters in my report are 125 sips. So what I'll do is, now that we have our water in there, I'm going to take a little glass stirring rod here, which is actually a thermometer at the moment, and I'm just going to slightly macerate all of these flowers in the water very, very slowly, and we're going to distill out quite literally an essence of these flowers out of the retort the very first time. So our distillate will come over the very first time, and that will leave all of these flowers behind in our boiling flask. Now these flowers we're going to leave at a mild temperature for probably five to 7 minutes after this is done. And that's why I have it in a sand bath, so I can control my temperatures a whole lot better and make it above where I want. And that will begin to dry out the flowers. Then I'll take my distillate and I'll covobate it, which is to say to add the distillate straight back over into what was left over in my retort. And then we'll distill it again. And the second time that we distill it, I'm going to let it stay there for about 5 minutes afterwards, and it's going to continue to dry those flowers out a little bit more. And at that point, I can take a glass stirring rod and I can move those flowers around because they're dry enough, and I can scrape them out to put them inside of my mortar and pestle right here, which has been heating up right next to my salt of tartar that we've recently crystallized, and we're just waiting for that to dry. And so we'll be taking the biomass at that point and grinding it up into as fine a powder as possible. and adding it back to the retort and pouring our distillate back over it. And then I'll distill it again. And we continue this for 7 cohobations. So that's 7 times of distilling. And on the 8th time that it distills out, then I'll take the biomass that's inside of the retort that's all left over. I'll calcine and leach all of that, turn that into pure crystalline salt as per normal leaching methods. And then I'm going to go ahead and add that back to the final distillate. And in this case, you have a material that is a spagyric equivalent of like a flour remedy, a Bach flour remedy, or also like a really potentized hydrosol in its physiological capacities. It's altogether different, but it's also very energetically susceptible. And because we're working with water and capturing the elements of this flour inside of the water can be taken as a remedy that will work on the astral level. And so this is a great way to work with a lot of plants if you really want to connect with their inherent astral energy so that you can dialogue with the plant material. And I suggest that everybody, before you work with a plant that you don't have this tremendous understanding of, not to go out and to look in this book and read up all the information that you can, because again, most people have no idea about the work that we do spagyrically and its physiological or astral or etheric or causal capacities, or even its capacity on the mental plane. So what we need to do, in my opinion, and in the system that I teach, is to begin to make an aqueous essence of the material and to take it in the amount. If they're poisonous, homeopathically attenuate them first, and then take it. If you're trained in such things. If not, don't do those things. If it's not poisonous, take it at its full potency in the amount of 1 to 5 drops or 1 to 10 drops before bed, and really feel the connection with that plant for as long as you need to. And in some cases, it might happen the very first night where the plant and you begin to share the synergistic intelligence, where you understand what the plant can be used for and what its astral makeup is and how it works on the physiological realm, and moreover, how it's going to work with you. And so I think that it's one of the most viable ways of energetically probing into materials. Now, this can be done with any foliage. It can ideally be done just with foliage and flowers, but it can also be done with roots and barks. But you're going to have to get your materials boiling, and I would suggest creating a decoction first, which is pretty much a boiled and reduced material, and then to be able to distill it out via this method. And again, it's going to have an entirely different energy than a final spagyric, because the spagyric is much more remedial and much more medicinal. This is going to work almost exclusively on the astral level, so that your astral body and the astral body of the material can share some space. And so that's what's going on here. So I've got it going right now. I'm going to go ahead and turn it up. Sorry if the helicopter flying overhead.
Yeah, I can hear it.
Actually,
well, while that's flying over.
Almost as if it wants to land.
Mm-hmm.
So I've turned this up, and for those who know how I work in the laboratory, I'm pretty strict and pretty stringent about philosophical distillations. There's a major distinction, in my opinion and in my experience, between alchemical materials and spagyric materials. Spagyric materials just, it's a formula. You can follow a formula and do it, and it definitely leaves room for art. But alchemical materials are much more exalted, they're capable of transformation, and they're done philosophically, which is to say that the material slowly sweats over and never gets to a distillation point. And in that way, we're going to do the same thing here with a very, very slow, very gentle distillation of this material over and over and over and over. And we'll be doing that 7 times. And it might take us a couple of days or even a week or so to actually finish this one particular remedy. But as I can always suggest and admonish, and I strongly, strongly, strongly suggest everybody follow this who's interested in alchemy and actually doing laboratory work, is to abide by the old alchemical motto of festa lentamente. Festa lentamente in Latin means to make haste slowly, and work as quickly as you can, work on days that are appropriate, so on and so forth. But at the same time, do your work philosophically so that it stays completely intact. It's my experience that a simple spagyric tincture, even that is made truly with the proper maceration times and letting it digest for 6 months or more in its initial maceration, allowing the salts to truly crystallize, being able to cohobate the tincture through a retort, which is to take your tincture and distill it out and pour your distillate back in over the fixed sulfur, out again and pour it back in and over the fixed sulfur, at least everything back to a tincture even now more potent.
I've got a frozen screen on Phoenix in Peru, so we'll give him a minute to fix that and maybe log back in if he needs to. But I did want to mention that I've worked with some flower petals before, but I hadn't ever really learned how to do it the way he's explaining. And so I was basically doing a mixture between Bach's essence and what I had been learning about spagyrics in the traditional manner with regular green plants. And one thing that I found that was difficult is I took these flower petals and I put them in the crucible, and I was heating them up with fire, so it was a pretty good amount of heat. It wasn't a slow calcination like we typically suggest. And what I did is as I put them in there, I was heating them up, and what happened is the water started to evaporate, and it started to turn into kind of a mush, and it really was kind of a mess. And as I was trying to clean up or trying to calcine this mushy flour mess that I was calcining, it took a really long time. It was kind of an ugly process, really. And so these tricks and tactics that Phoenix is giving us here is I shouldn't call them a trick. It's just a method that I didn't know about of actually distilling over the essence with water first, and then pulling out the water and oils from the petals first, and then you will have something that's dried that can be ground down with a mortar and pestle, and then actually calcined for adding back in later. So if I would have known that, I wouldn't have gone through the struggle of trying to calcine very moist flower petals. So this is really good stuff. If you want to work with flowers, this is really great information. So we've got Phoenix back here, so let me switch back to him. Hey Phoenix, I'm glad to see you're back.
So I wanted to show you guys just really quick. Here are a couple of specimens of the flowers that I'm actually working in. Much better. It's really interesting. It has five pointed petals here, much akin to a rose or a wild rose, and I also see buds. Right. So let me show you. That's the way the bud looks before the flower first. And then there is the actual flower, the way that it appears. That's what we have in our retort right now, are these little flowers. And they.
I have a question for you. You were feeling called.
Okay.
You're feeling called to the plant, and you felt like it might have certain qualities to it. And what I'm wondering is, were you using the way it looks to determine some of these things, or is this purely intuition? When you looked at it, you just thought, that's an interesting plant, or were you looking at it going, that grows an interesting way, that looks like it has an interesting vibration, and I'll bet it would teach this kind of a thing? Is that kind of how that came about?
Much more intuitive this particular time, Michael. So yeah, most important thing every alchemist or spagyrist to have an understanding of is the the doctor's signatures, which has a lot to do with its physical appearance, has a lot to do with its astral energy, the way that it calls to you, the things that it does, so on and so forth. This particular time, I was just walking around on the property, and these little flowers were very small and like purple and white, and they came from like these little berry-looking things, and I remember looking at them and just thinking that that was really odd, but then every time I passed by them, I would feel like a certain magnetism towards that plant, and even though I'm surrounded by thousands of species of the most amazing flowers that I've ever seen in my life out here, this plant in particular has really been reaching out to me and calling me. And so in this particular case, it's very intuitive. I know nothing about the plant. I want nothing to know about the plant until I'm done working with its with the Aqueous Essence over there, so that I can kind of get the download on what I feel. And of course, just to be safe, I'm going to homeopathically attenuate it first. And I'll do it at its very lowest dilution and take that if I feel safe, and I'll take it at the next dilution, and then I'll take it to the next dilution. And with that, I feel pretty complete. And I want to thank you, Michael, for always helping and being the director behind the scenes and making all of this possible by running all of the tech equipment and things like that. So thank you so much, man.
Yep, thank you. And it was an excellent show. I and the audience very much appreciate it. And until next time, this is Alchemiculture Live. We will see you on our next episode.